Dear human being, beloved soul, I welcome you to my podcast series, Conversations with the Universe. After a near-death experience, my perception of our human existence changed profoundly. I became more sensitive, with all our known senses. I feel more intensely, see people with different eyes, and often take a different perspective on life and our challenges. In my books, I share these altered perspectives and all the knowledge that has flowed through me since my near-death and thus recorded. For all those who are searching for something more, for the meaning of our existence here on Mother Earth. And it is now a great pleasure for me to share this knowledge with you in this way as a supplement to my books. This season I am dedicating myself to my very first work, The Basics of Being. I wish you many wonderful insights on your path. Thank you. Love.
First, a quick note about my network, SPINE. This is short for the Spiritual Network and is the first global social media network for holistic knowledge, awareness, spirituality, and above all, a bridge between providers and seekers. I invite you to join us and connect with me there. Feel free to look around, find lots of podcasts, events, healers, but above all, lots of inspiration to grow. It's free. But now, let's start with today's episode.
Hello, Sylvia. Welcome to this conversation we're having. I'm truly delighted. Now, after 53 episodes that you've produced about the work, The ABCs of Being, to hear you speak for the 54th time. And I'm very happy to repeat the title, The ABCs of Being. That was, it can now be said, after so many other works, your very first book. It was published in 2012, if I remember correctly, which in turn means you actually started working on it back in 2010. So, quite a significant amount of time has passed since then. Looking back now, after so many other books, how do you feel about this very first work of yours?
So first of all, a big hello to everyone listening. Hello, my dear ones, or as I like to call you, Padawans. I'm very happy that you've made it this far because 53 episodes is certainly no small number, and the ABCs of existence is, well, at least from the feedback I received from some people back then, when they had only read the book, a pretty tough nut to crack. But I have to say, it was a very important turning point in my life for me, because in a certain way I thought, cool, hey, now I've captured all my knowledge in one book. So everything I could figure out, research in my meditations up to that point, and I thought, this is it.
And interestingly, I actually also received feedback where people said, oh my gosh, this is like my second Bible. And Meme 60 said, I really have to read things 3, 4, 5 times before I even understand them, because they go so deep, because they're so multidimensional and so on. But all of you, or I think most of you, it wasn't the last book, it was the first, and today we've reached book number 10. That means there was still a lot more after that. But to give you an answer to your question, how am I? How am I doing? Especially now after I was able to immerse myself deeply once again in the fundamental principles of being. First and foremost, I am truly grateful that the podcast medium also exists, allowing me to share this incredibly valuable knowledge once again in a completely different way. Because that's something I understood quite quickly. Look at what I just mentioned based on the feedback I received, that people really struggled when they were reading the book, but interestingly, they didn't have such a hard time when they were listening to it. This means that by combining both, we can manage to reach a greater number of people. And yes, well, there are just so many chapters, so many diverse subjects that were touched upon and explored throughout this book, that I've actually become even more humble, much more humble regarding this whole topic. And even more so now when you see, wow, how complex this already is, and it's still nothing at all. It really was just a first step in this whole direction. So I am a bit grateful, humble, speechless to answer that to you.
Grateful, humble, but not speechless, as we're just realizing. I do find it. I truly believe in divine providence. I don't believe in mere coincidences. I believe in providential events, or as one might put it, in those intricately overlapping chains of causal connections. Why this introduction? This was your first book in the field of soul physics, as you like to call it. I always had big problems with mathematics in my life, but one thing was clear to me, that 1 times 1 is the first step before you get to spherical trigonometry. Now, your first book is called The Basics of Being. So, the fundamental arithmetic operations of mathematics, when applied to the physics of the soul, you will discover the initial foundational steps within this book. Why? For a deeper understanding of the universe, for comprehending what you truly mean by the term soul, and for grasping the intricate social dynamics between individuals, their souls, and their egos. How would you go about explaining this fundamental research, these very basic principles, to someone who has absolutely no prior knowledge or understanding of it?
So one thing I've often noticed over the years and always observed in myself, but also often in other authors, is that in most cases you actually write such books for yourself. So it was my personal way of explaining the world to myself, a method that, until that moment, no one else had ever presented or clarified to me in quite the same comprehensive manner. It was a perspective that, at the very least, was certainly going to offer me entirely distinct insights and provide answers far beyond anything anyone else had managed to do or explain up to that specific point in time. Well, my initial thought back then was for it to function as a comprehensive reference work, allowing anyone who might have an interest in these kinds of topics to simply delve into it.
In that case, I have to ask a clarifying question. You have pointed that out in several podcasts and also in your books. It was pointed out that during your lifetime you experienced a near-death event, which clearly demonstrated to you and allowed you to deeply feel that the soul truly exists, that the soul is capable of existing entirely independent of the physical body, that the soul possesses the ability to embark on various journeys and, crucially, to accumulate valuable experiences during these profound travels. Did this experience also provide the influence, the initial impulse to write that book, which eventually became One of Being at All?
But of course, but not in the way you might be thinking. Well, the near-death experience itself was the trigger that made me direct my entire focus, my whole way of thinking towards these subjects for the very first time. And after what felt like 10 years, I hadn't met anyone who could provide answers to all these questions that were simultaneously emerging within me. So many unanswered things had accumulated that I myself had to take the pen in hand. And that is why the book, in a certain way, is naturally a consequence of this experience. But it was also an interesting bridge, I believe I might even venture to say, because up until that point, that was, as you mentioned, 2010, 2011. Until then, it was still just I do a meditation, I see images or I feel things. And what the answer contains, I might even interpret myself. And then I write that down. And the entire book has become a collection, a kind of miscellany born from these meditations, during which I posed questions and the answers emerged through what one might call a more conventional or typical approach. And for example, the whole theme of the Wheel of Being, that entire experience of powerlessness, how vital it is for souls, so the whole thing, all the energetics and so on, these answers came through meditations, but in a completely different way than I had found in all other books.
That's exactly what I was going to address, but I have a quick follow-up question for any listener out there who might just be tuning in by chance right now and is hearing this for the very first time, what it is we're doing here right now, completely unprepared. Could you briefly explain to such a person what exactly the Wheel of Being is?
The wheel of being was one of the very first truly profound and deeply fascinating experiences where the spiritual world taught me that the cosmos consists of energies and that these energies possess a specific kind of movement. So the entire cosmos is in constant motion. There is no standstill. But every soul, every energy has an inherent movement that is uniquely its own. And this movement leads them to a point where it either expands its scope, enriches its consciousness, grows larger, and most importantly becomes stronger. Because in that context, it's exclusively about power. It's solely about raw strength. So it either gains in strength or conversely, it loses strength. With the loss of her strength, she also loses her consciousness, her very awareness of herself, of the world, her ability to perceive the world. And with that, she also loses the power of love, her capacity for love. And through this profound loss, she gradually arrives at a specific point, and that point is the point of utter powerlessness, a true point of no return, or perhaps a point of return. Ultimately, it's a state where the energy within itself feels as though it's about to completely collapse, but such a concept simply doesn't exist in the cosmos. And yet, it's a point where one feels incredibly helpless. I can't go on. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to at all. This simply can't be it. I'm just done. And right there, in that very moment, lies an incredible amount of potential and immense power, because the energy begins to turn, to shift, moving in a completely new direction. From what she brought forth in that very moment, in that moment of complete collapse, an energy arose from within her that declared, no more of this, absolutely not. And then truly that energy began, in the truest sense of the word, to pivot in a completely new direction. It is. And this different focus lifts the energy bit by bit by bit, because it has decided within itself never to feel that other way again. And from now on, everything it does is aligned solely with the goal of never again, meaning to be better, changed, and to feel more energetic.
Thank you very much. For those surprisingly listening to a podcast with Sylvia Leifheit for the first time, this was a short excerpt from the wonderful book, The ABCs of Being. But you just explained that you received the answer to the question, what is the wheel of being, from the spiritual world, from the subtle world? That logically leads me to the next question. Many of your other books are channeled books. Whether it's the book Conversations with a Friend of the Indians, or The Wisdom of King Solomon, or Conversations with the Entities of Abajania, these are all channeled works. To what extent is that the fundamental essence of being a channeled book and or the result of your own intellectual work?
That's a great question. Thank you very much. By the way, I actually have this book right here in front of me, everyone. It's a really thick tome. I can understand why people say, wow, it's so complex and so much. And it's also very heavy. It weighs 1.5 kilograms. And you'll find, if you truly have the desire not just to read the vocal messages or news as they are presented, you'll discover in the book many, many other impulses, sketches, formulas, and symbols. It is far, 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 far more complex than what you've heard here in the podcast. And to answer your question, actually, the symbols were what I first received through channeling. And then there's the Wheel of Being, which, by the way, looks like a horizontal figure 8. The Wheel of Being is one of the very first things I channeled. These were messages because I somehow wanted to visually capture for the book the profound messages that I had received. And then all of a sudden, a figure 8, an infinity symbol, began to draw itself. And for those of you who might not yet be aware, I write based on or after having worked or currently working as a medium. Those were the very first moments, the initial breaths that I ever took, when I truly experienced myself posing a question to the vast cosmos, and then something began to visibly move. Either something was drawn, or an entire word, or even a complete sentence wrote itself. It simply wrote itself. So it was mainly all the sketches in this book. I'm repeating myself, for example, the Wheel of Being. But there are also many, many others that were in a way channeled. And this channeling, this process of questioning, I then refined in all the other books, partly supported by feedback from people who read the ABC of Being, and as I mentioned, said they didn't understand it well. And then I thought, I understand the spiritual world very well. So something seems to be going wrong here, meaning maybe it's Sylvia who gets involved too much, and she's a Virgo ascendant and very analytical and thinks very physically. And so my favorite subject was physics, actually. Physics and chemistry, I'll gladly admit, who perhaps just asks too many questions or overinterprets things, especially. And after that, the time began when I told myself, I'll just let that go. Sylvia won't say anything at all anymore. I'll really just let the cosmos speak now. But that only came about after this 1-on-1 of being.
I'm feeling a very personal impulse right now to defend you. I believe I've also read this book with great enthusiasm, of course, and I don't think it's too hard or too demanding, or I can't think of a third example, but rather I am profoundly aware that in our present era, in our contemporary society, I only need to mention the names WhatsApp and Instagram to show that we collectively possess an attention span of at most 3 to 5 words, let alone entire sentences in a row. And then the curtain closes again. That's just how it is. You have to accept it. You can't brutally change time. It just is. And if you now receive a work that has a different standard, a demand for continuity and a deep explanation, then I'll simply say no to all those who now wish to obtain the basics of being. You absolutely must read it in small steps, very, very slowly. Piece by piece. You mustn't believe for a second that you can just whip through this book like a Jerry Cotton novel. You don't just quickly make a meal. No, you must take it chapter by chapter, sentence by sentence, thought by thought, let the idea mature, let it sink in, and then see how it has changed your view of the world. And that leads me to my next question for you. One suddenly begins, let's say, through an impulse, an input, or an idea to write this book. Then, while writing through one's own thoughts and channeled messages, one arrives at a result, and there it is. That was already more than 12 years ago. What has it done to you and your perspective on the world? As if you were your own reader. What kind of echo has this book sent into the present day?
For me, this was absolutely the foundational step, truly paving the way for a much more profound engagement with, and indeed a significantly deeper commitment to all these important subjects. It's great that you just brought that up. By the way, yes, absolutely.
I myself have. I don't find the book difficult to read in any way, shape or form.
All of this has been written down. I mean, yes, but that is, of course, truly this is our current era where people are indeed very, very, very much distracted. But for me, it was the absolute foundation. And once again, back to the commitment. When I then came to realize that there was so much more to it, and I still had so many questions that were not yet fully, not even 100,000% answered, and in further meditations I received even more answers. And above all, I was able to further develop this particular gift of mine, the writing channel. From that point on, so much more truly opened up to me that I would describe it as more or less the very entrance to a house. And I then spent the subsequent years utilizing all the other books for that purpose. And through that, I also shared the knowledge that had come to me. I used it to understand the cosmos even better, to grasp it more profoundly. And what it demanded of me, which might also answer your question, is exactly this commitment. It's not a casual endeavor. If I had just said back then, oh yeah, cool man, that's really cool. I've brought a book weighing 1.5 kilograms into the world, which tackles quite complex subjects and also covers them with knowledge that in this particular form I personally hadn't encountered before. Cool, that's it. If I had just said that, then everything else wouldn't have come into being. But the cosmos guides us. Nothing is by chance. This name and the entire work was certainly no coincidence. That's why it was all the more wonderful for me afterwards to truly see that one can delve even deeper and deeper and deeper into things, and how incredibly enriching it is to gain that profounder understanding of what truly holds the world together at its very core.
I am a very strong advocate for practical implementation.
What do I mean by that? In so many areas that concern themselves with spirituality in and of itself and generally, I often get the feeling that a great deal remains in an intellectual, floating, hovering above the world, theoretical construct. You can talk about almost everything. Talk, talk, talk.
Goethe said, feeling is everything, mere name, sound and smoke. So a thought, if it doesn't flow into a feeling, has no power at all. That is a truth. At the same time, what do I derive from that? I deduce from this that the very fundamentals of existence must lead to the first steps into a world of spirituality. Simply put, practical application. And in this context, I want to talk about the cosmic cross that you constantly emphasize, highlight, and draw attention to in your works. Could you tell us something about this very practical step in life for those who might be hearing about it for the very first time? The cosmic cross.
It's really good that you bring that up, because it is an incredibly important key that reached me relatively soon after the publication of the ABCs of Being through a friend of the Native Americans. And I myself was quite surprised at just how incredibly powerful a key this truly is to get back into contact with one's own soul, and ultimately, through the soul itself, to bring renewed strength back into the soul. And what that brings in terms of life-changing possibilities, because less power is simply energy that exists full of fear, dread, panic, and hysteria. And with more strength, life is a continuous gift, no matter how big the storm outside may be. The cosmic cross is actually also the main topic in my soon-to-be-held workshop. I would be very, very happy to invite each and every one of you. I would be delighted if you could join us. It takes place on the 1st.
And on the 2nd of May, it's going to be in not Wiesbaden, no, it's actually taking place in Frankfurt, at the Frankfurter Ring. And
I can only keep emphasizing this crucial point, that nothing truly comes from nothing. The cosmic cross, you see, is really so very simple, but it still requires a certain level of dedication, not just casually performing the cosmic cross, not just in passing. Any of your exercises that you learn from other people, from healers, from seminar leaders and workshops, please, you should be completely present. And that's also what the cosmic cross as my main key has taught me.
And I believe that goes for all things, for all practices.
Now I could humorously say, I understand that, but the cosmic cross wasn't explained to me just now. May I briefly explain it, because I am a layman who practices it myself every morning? No, I may not, because you want that.
That the people are coming to attend the course.
Oh, I understand. Let me tell you something, just one thing. It will definitely be worth your while.
The fundamentals of being open up perspectives on spiritual dimensions that many people may already know from their own personal religion. I have now, through my observations of the human world, come to realize that there are often relationships between two people which are profoundly shaped by a very peculiar kind of neurosis, by strange, by quite unusual, original, displaced feelings that fit together, don't fit together, get entangled and don't really lead to anything positive.
For the dissolution of such neurotic relationships, there are all sorts of available resources: psychoanalysis, psychiatry, and a thorough re-evaluation of one's social conduct. And it's often the case that when people take a step towards self-healing, no matter what that looks like, a neurotic relationship ends because the hook of one's own neurosis no longer fits into the loop of the partner's neurosis. Why this introduction? Religions as we know them, and I'll keep this very brief, have caused the most unimaginable suffering in all of humanity that one could possibly conceive of. Of course, phrases like love thy neighbor and so on are a nice sentiment, but my grandmother does that too. For that I don't need any religion. But the derivation of all religions, when translated into situations of power, is exclusively cruelty, baseness, and evil itself. Why this introduction? If I now look at content, at spiritual content, as in your book, the ABC of being, then it's possible that thought patterns, mental images, and habitual spiritual behavior dissolves and releases me from the constricting mantle of a conventional religion. Have you spoken to people about this who have told you, I have experienced exactly that myself?
Yes, indeed, to this day. But that now applies not just to this book, but to the others too. So all initiation series, everything. It does something to people, and that's exactly what it's meant to do. And this should be in the most exclusively positive and uplifting way possible. It should set you free, it should give you strength, and it should release everything that holds you back, everything that firmly grips you and prevents you from growing, from moving forward, from truly flying, and from fully blossoming. That, please, should be released. But how is that even possible? That can only be achieved through sheer strength, and that's why we find ourselves going around in circles. The books and the very fundamentals of being initiated this process. Start bringing strength into your soul without you even consciously knowing it right away. Because this also happens through other frequencies, through the words themselves, how they are written, how they are chosen. And simply take place on many very different levels.
I'd like to introduce my next question now with an opening that might, and I truly hope it does, give you the chance to provide the answer I'm wishing for. I'll begin with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a man, a native of Salzburg, and all of a sudden he remembers the overture to the Magic Flute. From where could that possibly originate? One might now be inclined to ask, yes, Mr. Mozart, how do you know? How can you be so certain that this one? Did you write that intentionally? Is it a conscious decision to compose the overture for the Magic Flute, or was it simply an idea that came to them transmitted from some unknown source? What do you say to people who claim, well, that's all well and good. Here's the book of King Solomon, and it contains everything he thought and said. Oh, how am I supposed to know for certain that this is truly King Solomon? Mrs. Leifheit, what do you tell these people? Look, it's Wolfgang.
I believe that a person who is in no way spiritually active or spiritually open, or who engages with such topics in any form or manner, and these can also be expressed through art, by the way, that such individuals simply cannot truly grasp or understand it, because what occurs is that the channel of our soul opens up and it projects itself out into the vastness of the cosmos. It does so if one consciously attends to it, whether through the cosmic cross or all sorts of other spiritual exercises. He becomes purified, and through this much clearer channel, the messages are able to come through like a highway. Information then continuously flows through you, depending on how deeply you concentrate.
And I believe that Wolfo, as you would call him, he simply had a good connection to the powers above, as you would say. Although, hello, I will forever, truly forever, refuse to refer to this above as a location again and again, because I have a very big problem with that. I really don't like it at all when people here talk about up and down in space when we're discussing the cosmos, but Okay, we've already covered that topic in one of the other books, in one of the other episodes. And that's exactly what happens with me, that I simply, throughout all this time, when I thought the basics of being, that was it, that's enough, that's all there is, I still continued to care, worked intensively on myself, truly committed myself to all these topics and to discovering and exploring that which is invisible to our eyes. And over time, I just kept purifying my channel, purifying, washing, call it what you will. And in doing so, the information at the end flowed through me more and more smoothly and quickly. And that's why I also like to say quite often, I am now in ChatGPT mode with the cosmos. It's a question and I get the answer. I ask and I get the answer and I don't question it. Nothing. So I don't spend hours wondering who's speaking because I feel who's speaking. And that brings us back to a very specific level where you're already so confident in your understanding of the entire issue, the entire topic, that you have indicators where, now I'm speaking with my Indian friends. That's King Solomon. That's someone else. There's Batu, and all the others. There are just so many of them. Of course, I've naturally refined this over time to precisely locate it and to truly understand it. But one thing that's also very, very important with all these topics is that it's not like every energy can simply interfere. There are also certain other mechanisms that are protectively active, which, let's just say, perhaps shouldn't be explicitly named. Long story short, it happens because it's allowed to happen.
Is that even possible to do? Now, I'm just a completely normal listener, and I might be hearing this for the very first time in my life. I emphasize this point precisely because I always try to think of individuals who don't possess a long history or extensive background in spirituality, who, in a manner of speaking, simply walk into a bookstore and just happen to see this particular item standing there on a shelf, who then decide to open it up and suddenly find themselves encountering something profound to read, something truly significant to see.
Even in the wonderful pictures in this very book, that truly resonates with them.
And suddenly they feel like I should orient my life in this direction. I should concern myself with listening to my soul, listening to my inner self. It's simple to say trust is the key to these paths, because if, for example, I'm not sure, am I getting a message right now? Is someone speaking to me? Is it my subconscious? I would answer very, very simply, it doesn't matter at all. Because if someone then say, oh, that's just the subconscious, my immediate counter question would be, and who exactly told the subconscious to deliver this particular message? That means what truly heals is right, as Paracelsus himself would have said.
And whatever you hear or feel, when you simply open up to the word, spirituality is valid. And the next message is quite simple. Do not do to others what you would not want done to you. That means the parameters are very simple. And in that respect, I differ very much from some people in the so-called spiritual scene. In my opinion, there is good and evil. There are things that are helpful for the soul's journey and things that hinder the soul's journey. I'd like you to take a moment and imagine this. You're walking into a bookstore and you see a book called The Fundamentals of Being. You open it up, an image really speaks to you and a chapter truly draws you in. What do you advise such a person regarding how they should practically continue their personal life when they suddenly feel enthusiastic?
First and foremost, as you've already said, just read the chapters bit by bit and let them truly sink in and then see what happens. Because you must not underestimate the brain. This radio station that's constantly broadcasting right here inside of us, it can be programmed. And as I've already mentioned, the words and the content also have a profound effect on this brain, and they fundamentally change the direction of the energy within you. When we consider the wheel of being, it means that as long as you feel within yourself, I want to give my life a different impulse, a new direction, and you consistently act on that, for example, by continuing to read, gradually practicing meditation, also seeking information elsewhere, attending schools, workshops, and so forth.
So, if you simply persist, what you've truly been yearning for will begin to manifest on its own. The only thing I really have to say, the cosmos demands from us. Even though that word is already difficult again because it wants to demand.
I'd like it exactly as desired.
The only entry fee here is actually dedication. And I don't find that bad at all. Because if we all just expect everything to simply fall into our laps and happen anyway or not, it doesn't matter. Difficult. Then we're back to the topic of personal responsibility. That was very thoroughly examined and considered by a certain friend of the Indians. Commitment and discipline are truly essential elements on this journey. So I want to impress upon these people to persevere. Please keep striving for the longing that you will feel better.
Out of a deep longing for your lives to become more beautiful, brighter, and above all more joyful, because that is truly what matters.
We didn't come here to just constantly badmouth others, to only ever see the negative in everything. Everything is always just awful politics, blah, 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 blah. No. Think differently, feel differently, see the positive, see the beautiful, be grateful for the life that we have been given, the opportunities that present themselves, see problems as chances, overcome them and move forward.
I've learned something new again. That's great. I've become stronger. That's great. Oh man, this is really strenuous, seriously, but it is exciting.
I've learned so much. That's absolutely amazing.
It would be nice now if things would get a little quieter again. Yes, great. Life is such a wonderful gift. If you just keep bringing this to mind a little bit every single day when all the negativity is just relentlessly pouring down upon you, from your next door neighbor all the way to the world of politics, from the weather to whatever else you can think of, your bank balance, please, 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 all these impulses are here to uplift you. And that is exactly what the cosmos desires, to uplift each and every one of you, to restore your inner strength so that you may become even greater and even stronger in your very soul. Yes, and for that very purpose, I also wrote the ABCs of Being. But among other things, I'd also like to briefly remind the others, when I received my initiation into the secrets of the cosmos from friends and to the Native Americans, my good old teacher from Atlantis, I can also warmly recommend him to everyone else who enjoys a different form of reading, because there it's actually just ChatGPT, or like ChatGPT, only question and answer, and so many others like my friend King Solomon, and well, we are. It is so complex, I don't even know where to begin or where I should
entities
finish.
of
Yes, they were as well.
Abijania,
In a trance.
Maria.
Yes, I mean, there are just so many of them. Even I myself I'm standing there myself completely amazed, and I can, however, already tell you, to give you a little teaser, the initiation and the cartography of the subtle worlds, which is volume 5 of the initiation series and my 8th book that came out in 2 parts. This has actually taken what I began as the fundamentals of being in my perception today quite significantly into a realm where I can confidently state that I have now truly and profoundly explored it. Because we are present there, I am fully immersed in this cartography. An initiation into the cartography of the subtle ethereal worlds. There we truly have the different levels that I had already begun to name in the fundamentals of being. The level of the deceased, the level of the white brotherhood. Is there hell? Is there heaven? What is purgatory supposed to be? In the ABCs of Being, all of this is lightly touched upon, relatively easily introduced, and in the initiation into the cartography of the subtle realms, it is examined much, much more intensely. And above all, the topic of the soul is taken apart much, much more thoroughly. One could almost say analyzed. We learn exactly how a soul is constituted, how it can tear, and why such a thing happens at all. What should one be mindful of so that one doesn't fail? What is one's purpose in life? What should one simply pay attention to increase their energy? What can take away one's energy? And so on and so forth. We could make a brand new episode about that now. But there are already so many episodes. You also have the initiation into the cartography of the subtle realms right here. I believe that was the very last one. And just this as a small additional impulse. But here, now and today, it was and is about the ABCs of existence. My launch as an author, and I'm very grateful that I was allowed to do this.
That was quite a closing statement. I would like to conclude by sharing a quote from Tibet, which states, Wherever you look, there you will fly. Thank you, Sylvia. Love.
That fits perfectly. Thank you very, very much. Because that's exactly the essence of this book's main message and what we're reminding ourselves of here. Glad you said that. So please look towards the sun, towards the light, towards what's beautiful, and then life will be even better. Thank you for being with me, for staying with me, and for continuing to follow me. And I'll just quickly remind you on the 7th. In March 2026, I will be giving a lecture in Darmstadt at the Spirit and Life Expo, where I will describe the topic of birth, life, and then also death again, from the perspective of a soul. What happens to the energy within the soul when it incarnates, how it lives, and what happens when it dies. I also try to illustrate that visually, naturally, and I would be very happy if you could come by. Perhaps 1 or 2 of you are in the vicinity. Otherwise, we'll simply hear from each other here again.
On that note, I truly want to thank you all, and please don't ever forget the spirit of Carpe Vitam. Make sure you really
Let's
seize
continue
every
cheerfully.
moment of your life. Thank you, my dears.
Thank you very much for listening, and I would like to remind you to join our community Spine. We are a community that wants to help you live a healthier life, practice your spirituality, and expand your consciousness. We help you find and connect with healers around the world, and we help you give your life a new meaning in different ways. We are Spine, connections that help.